So and we're live. Good afternoon, everybody. This Scrutiny Committee meeting is being conducted on a hybrid basis in accordance with local government elections Wales Act 2021, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders. The Council's standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. A recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public view as soon as possible after the meeting. Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request. Images and sound recordings may be also used for training purposes within the council. Welcome. So item 1 on the agenda today is apologies for absence. So we're going to be apologies.
Apologies from Councillor Perkins and Councillor Roger.
Noted. Any other apologies? Okay. Any declarations of interest at this point that any member needs to make? Okay, item 3 is the 2026-27 draft budget and medium-term financial plan. Comprehensive set of papers. We will focus in the committee on our service areas that we have responsibility for. So the finance officers, which we have responsibility for in any event, will initially give us an overview of the whole budget process and the budget itself. We'll then invite the infrastructure team, because they've only got one saving on a sort of one item on fees and charges, to join us first, then followed by housing and communities, then regeneration and economic development, then road standards, then people policy and transformation, then environment and public protection. And at the end of the meeting, we will then wrap up any recommendations which will go forward to the overview and Scrutiny Management Committee for collation back to Cabinet. After each head of service has come and presented their service area, I don't think they need to stay thereafter, and then we can formulate recommendations between us as the finance team. If everybody's happy with that, we'll crack on and hand over to my Ariannol team.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There is a presentation, which hopefully will just make sure that we're consistent between all of the scrutiny committees. You could put that on there? Yes. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So we can go to the first slide, please, or the second slide, I should say. Yeah, so just to remind the committee, this is now part of the formal consultation on the budget. As the Chair has indicated, the minutes of this meeting will be considered by the Overview Management Committee, and that will go to the Cabinet. So budget was agreed on the 12th of January, consultation till the end of the month, final budget recommendation by the Cabinet in early February on the 11th, and then that will go to the Council on the 24th of February, alongside any alternative budget that any group will then to put forward, and that will be considered on the 24th of February. So, as I said, this meeting is part of that consultation process. Thank you. Next slide. So the next slide, which is quite small here, does summarise the position on the budget. This table is within the draft budget report that Cabinet considered earlier, and it just shows you the 3 main components of the budget changes next year, which is the annual cost inflationary increases across those areas, budget pressures which are unavoidable and funded in the MTFP, 7.7 million, and some of the savings in there of just over 4 million. Now, the committee will note that on the savings, pretty much all of it is in the non-service and cross-service line there. Cross-service just means at this point they've not been allocated 2 services, but they will be by the time it gets to council, and that's because that saving is a reduction in the employer's pension contribution rates following the triennial valuation of the pension fund. So it's shown there as a cross-service saving, but that will be across all pay budgets effectively across the council. All of the savings are in the non-service, so we can talk you through the non-service savings if you would like, and that's it. But you will notice that there are hardly any savings in service areas this year, and that's partly because of a new approach that we've taken to managing the budget process, which we'll come on to later. So those are the three key kind of ingredients that the Scrutiny Committee needs to be aware of. Thank you. Next slide. So before we get into that, funding, Welsh Government's draft budget gave this council an increase of 20.8 million. About 4.3 of that was for existing specific grants, which are now within the RSG. So real increase in funding of 16.5 million. And Newport was the highest increase in Wales for the RSG. And that is because of the data that drives the distribution of the overall pot, effectively. Population data figures and school pupil numbers are two of the biggest drivers of that increase. So by some margin, actually, Newport was #1 slot for that. £6.3 million worth of extra council tax income, split between the increase, which is proposed, of 4.9%, and then tax base and the collection rate. We reduced the collection rates for council tax following the COVID period, like many other councils, but actually our collection of council taxes has remained reasonably buoyant at historical levels, and therefore we've increased that back up to kind of where it was. So that obviously also has a positive impact on the council tax income figure there of 6.3 million, as well as the tax base that, again, the Cabinet report addresses that. It was about a 2.6% increase in the tax base. No surprises there, because that is the same thing that drives the RSG as well, because that comes with population and pupil numbers, etc. So now, whilst that is a significant amount of additional funding increases, the previous slide, showed you the kind of cost pressures and the inflationary cost increases that we've got to accommodate. Savings are still required, and as I've said, there's £4 million worth of savings in the MTFP. The vast majority of those have been non-service or employer pension savings. Thank you. So let's look at inflation. So those are the figures there over the 3 years. The assumptions for pay is 3% next year, 2.5% in the year after. That was based on the prediction for where inflation was going at the time that we did this. So inflation was predicted to fall towards the government's target, but not reach the government targets next year. But it will continue to fall closer to the government's targets, certainly within about 12 to 15 months. And actually, as we speak here today, that does seem to be the trajectory that is happening. Doesn't necessarily mean that is what the pay rises are going to be agreed, of course, but that is what that has been based on. The pay award for this current financial year was 3.2% for context. And that's also for teachers as well. We've got the same assumption for teachers and for NJC staff. And then on top of that, you've got contract inflation as well, and pretty much all contracts are inflated each year. Commission care services, which is not the remit of this committee in administration care, that's driven by the real living wage because of the commitments to maintain those minimum wage levels in that sector. So that will be a conversation on Wednesday with the People's Scrutiny, but just to give you that context. And there has been some sharing of information with other local authorities, and actually our assumptions on pay, contract inflation, etc., they're pretty much in the pack. which is probably a fairly, you feel reasonably comfortable that our own assumptions here is probably where the majority of other people's thinking is at as well. So 18.7 million there of inflation figures next year. So you can see how that increase in funding, whilst helpful, it really, there are a lot of cost pressures that goes against that. I think that the commission care services, which I know is not an issue here, is sickening just in itself. Next slide, please. And then we've got funded MTFP pressures, and it's important that we understand funded and unfunded this year, because that's our new approach. Services were asked to mitigate budget pressures within their service areas as far as was possible this year, because inevitably you only end up having to find company savings in order to fund those. So that was done, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But clearly there were unavoidable budget pressures that had to be funded through the council's budget process, and there's 7.7 million there. Some of them is just a follow through from the previous year, full year impacts of stuff that was done last year. But there's 5.5 million there that's new this year. So whilst we had an approach where budget pressures were scrutinised with even more attention this year than kind of normal, and there was this assumption at the beginning that services would fund those or find ways of mitigating those, inevitably it was not possible to do it for everything, and that is those there. And you can obviously see that the vast majority of those lies in the children, schools, education, and housing areas. No surprises there. It's our budget monitoring and the analysis of the issues that gives rise to, and some of the policy issues impacting upon us that drives this. And obviously, those are the areas where we do have ongoing budget challenges and where there are, specific policy initiatives. So no surprises there. Next slide. So this is the new budget approach. I just explained it, but that gave rise to nearly 5 million, 4.9 million of pressures. They're not in the budget, in the MTFP. They're not funded next year. They are real because they're here now. However, services are mitigating those in various ways. Now, obviously, there's an inherent risk with this approach. You do need to mitigate them, because if you don't, and they are real, we're going to be having an in-year financial management challenge next year. So, it's really important that everybody delivers on those by or as close to the 1st of April as is possible. So that's what I'm recommending that we focus on. Next slide. So we've got the budget report of the cabinet listed the values of that 4.9 and how that is being service area totals for those. So the next slide, please. So this is the table. So that's the 4.7 million next year, 4.9 over the 3 years. Again, no surprises there. The biggest areas of budget pressures mitigated are in the kind of people-based services. So they'll be subject to Wednesday's conversation, but there are a number of those in this area as well. And that is what we need to be focused on between now and beginning of April, to make sure that those mitigations are actually actioned and they deliver on those mitigations. Thank you. Next slide. So these are the savings within the MTFP next year. As we've said, pretty much all of it comes from the cross-service and the non-service. You can see there are some small provision environments, regen, that's also there. But I would suggest to you as a committee, you know, the focus of these meetings has always been on budget savings. And I think this year that doesn't actually hold, because there are, with the exception of non-service, there are literally very little savings out there. The key issue is to do mitigation for the budget pressures. Next slide. Which is why the recommendation to scrutiny, and I'll be giving this to the other scrutiny as well, to get some consistency, is that we review those unfunded budget pressures. Yes, you can review the budget assumptions on pay and inflation. We can look at the investments, the £5.5 million worth of new investment there, and have a look at those in terms of their adequacy, in terms of the risk areas in those areas. But beyond those, the budget savings are actually very much a relative non-issue this year, with the exception of the non-service. But of course, as a committee, you can talk through whatever you like, of course. Yeah. But that's the recommendation, and I'll be doing the same to the people one as well, as we discussed with you, Chair, in your meeting, and with the Chair of people as well. So I'm happy to talk through we are happy to talk through the non-service savings if you would like to. Beyond the pension one that done. Yeah. Within finance, there are no budget pressures that are unfunded. Beyond that, there's nothing, but happy to do that one now if you want, since we're up here. It's up to you. Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll open it to the committee then in terms of questions around the sort of non-service and the cross-service pressures, and you know, if you've got any questions on the process followed itself, or some of the assumptions around pay and inflation and all the rest of it, now's the opportunity to pitch those to Myriad and his team. Anybody got any questions at this stage? Would you like me to list there's so little of them, the non-service savings that we'd like to say about that? If you don't mind, that might be useful for committee. Yeah, they're quite straightforward. So there's that saving on the pensions, which is following the triennial valuation. There's just over a 2% saving in the draft budget there. The option is there for us to go up to 3% following that triennial valuation. That's just over £2 million. And that's just because the pension fund is in good health, and the actuaries have said to all the companies actually you can reduce your employers' contributions. So where we've been funding shortfalls, particularly in the last few years, haven't we, with pension? The fund is not in a shortfall position now at this point, because the stock market, but also more importantly the outlook is so much better now. So that's the actuaries kind of reports to us.
Are the local authorities then fed in the contribution, or is it just?
Well, I mean, that'll be up to them. But I understand that all of us have the option to.
Are we the only ones that are?
No. All of the Grand Council. And actually, you know, I see this across the UK now. Local government pension schemes across the UK have all gone into a positive place. So this is pretty much normal. So just over 2%, assumed in the draft budget. The draft budget is a balanced budget. The options there to go up to 3. The other thing. Why wouldn't we go up to that? That's an ongoing conversation with the administration. So they're giving us the option to go to 3, but you've budgeted to only go to 2 at this point. Is that right? At this point. Is that because if you go to 3, they might not allow you to go to 3, or if they said no, it's fine? Yeah, I think we can go up to 3. We needed to go up to just over 2% to produce a balanced draft budget. Okay. So there could be further. So there's 2 outstanding opportunities, I suppose, before the administration finalises the budgets at the beginning of February. One is there is the option to consider a further increase up to the 3% of pensions. The Welsh Government, after their draft announcement, indicated an increase in local government funding, which should be coming through tomorrow in their final budget. But they've given us a heads up on the kind of figures, and there could be a £6 million increase in this council's RSG confirmed tomorrow. So those are two opportunities that that we'll be considering over the next couple of weeks.
That was going to be one of my questions, really, because the that agreement with Clyde was sort of widely published on the 9th of December. We delayed setting out our budget until January. Why haven't we included any assumptions for that money coming in when it's pretty much guaranteed that we'd have got at least 5 million if it was split across 22 local authorities as an even pot? It just seems disingenuous to be consulting the public and members on a budget which just we know isn't a true and accurate picture of the money we're getting.
These reports are actually prepared quite a bit in advance of cabinet meetings. This paper for you was done in advance as well, so there was no time to consider the impact of that 6 million and then get all the papers etc. ready for the cabinet meeting with Christmas in between etc. It was simply a timing issue. There was no more than that.
It's a month between the 9th of December and when these papers went to cabinet on the 9th of January. It's a month. I appreciate there's a break between Christmas. It's only a 4 or 5 day break, isn't it?
Obviously, it's not just the fact that you've got 6 million. You've also got to consider what you want to do with it, and then you can start writing.
But you'd expect it to at least be reflected in the papers as, because you don't have to produce a balanced budget. You can produce a budget with a projected surplus at this stage, which you haven't identified, but just seems bonkers not to include it. And surely the consultation would be, we've got an additional 6 million quid, how would you want to see us spend it? It just seems bonkers to me that we haven't asked the question to the public. We've got an additional 6 million quid if we keep council tax at 4.9. Would you rather us spend that on reducing your council tax or invest it in potholes or schools or education? Ask people where they want to spend the money, and there's been no opportunity to do that, which just seems absolutely ludicrous to me.
Yeah, I know what most of my residents would be saying, and they'd be fix the potholes.
Of course,
definitely.
but it's not the point. I'm sure lots of people have different views, but to actually not give people the opportunity to say we've got an additional 6 million quid at least, and probably more than pensions, and not have that consultation just seems like the process is flawed to me.
Okay, I mean obviously you can provide that feedback as you wish, Chair. But from our perspective, it was no more than just a timing issue. So those are the two opportunities that are there now for the current budget. The other non-service savings was a realignment of energy budgets and unused NI contractors budgets for 25/6. That's 1.2 million, and a small business process re-engineering saving of 115. So there are only 4 savings that makes up that non-service cross-service saving. None of them have got a service impact. So not a huge amount to talk about in terms of saving.
Yeah. Okay. And we should sort of indicate you might want to say something, so please do join us.
Sorry, I suppose just to add to Lurg in the background there. I suppose just to add to that, look, I totally get that, but I think we just have to remember what we're consulting on when we have the settlement. Will be, does the settlement come through?
End of this month, I think it is.
So it's all draft, right? So everything we're consulting on is draft. And I think the way we've approached the consultation this time is around, because there aren't any big savings in there. It's about that approach and about the things that are important to people. So, you know, what is important. So we'll leave to gather that sort of feedback. And it's all a moving feast. And whilst, you know, there was some time between that announcement, and there'll be some time between that announcement and getting the final settlement. So we were all kind of reasonably confident we're going to get some additional money. It's literally months worth of work. Yes, it's the point where we have this thing that we actually say, well, that's where we are today, and that was, you know, that's what was released at the time, right? So it'll always be moving. It usually moves all the way through those periods of time. This is, I suppose, this year's a bit different because it looks like it's going to be a particularly big movement associated with it. But I totally get your point. But because of all of that, it would have been probably impossible for us to say, well, so whilst we could have said, well, what could we do with this year? It would have been possible to say, here's some concrete plans for that in that period of time. I think that's the point.
Yeah, I take it, but it's always a moving between now
and it's particularly so this year.
Yeah, but given that Cabinet also delayed setting its draft budget from December to January as well, it just seemed like there was an opportunity missed for me.
Yeah, and we'll pick those things after the consultation responses anyway, and obviously we can, you know, say, well, actually we think, you know, yeah, you're talking about these investments, we think you should probably invest.
So in the consultation, are there any questions which sort of ask, if we do have additional money, what would you want to say?
I think, Councillor, asked more generally about this sort of approach, but we're going through we're doing board meetings this week, right? So, you know, I'll be talking about that additional money in those board meetings as well as with other officers when we're doing those presentations. So we can pull those into reflection. And because we do engagement on a general basis anyway, we ask people what's important. We know what the sorts of things that the public are saying in the reports as well, right? So all of that can be taken into consideration with the final review. Your views as well, and obviously it'll go to council for discussion, and each group is allowed to put in an alternate budget to that as well. So, you know, it'll this is part, I suppose the point of it, this is part of that process. It isn't the totality of it, right? So it's not perfect science, and we do listen to what people say, we do feed that information in. At the end of the day, it'll be some political priorities and the decision on council make the decisions.
Of course, yeah. Thanks, Reece. Okay. Any other questions for the committee around sort of the points Marion sort of outlined and the general sort of budget process?
I've just got a question regarding the surplus of the current budget. Do you want to ask that now?
Yeah, in terms of projected.
Have we got projected figures on the current surplus for this budget year?
No. I mean,
that's too early, isn't it?
Yeah. So Cabinet considered a forecast in their last meeting. That was about 2.4 million underspent. Obviously, when the answer is no, that will be May, June. The Cabinet will decide then.
I think Alex's point is the 2.4 still what you expect to achieve at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean that only went to Cabinet a couple of weeks ago, isn't it? So I'm not aware of anything else that's happened since
last year. We were quite fortunate to get some sort of additional grants, and I think your point is that we're likely to sort of get a pot of money that might.
February, March, history tells us that often happens. It's really the Chancellor's budget in the autumn. She did allow an increase in the Welsh Government's reserve, and that would also now grow by inflation, which it hasn't been able to. So actually that will enable Welsh Governments to probably keep it underspent, or more of it underspent, as opposed to distributing them in February, March, because it's either use them or lose them.
Yeah.
So obviously that's what leads to a big distribution in February, March. You know, obviously the bigger reserve will enable them to kind of keep more of that in the future. That's probably good from a value for money perspective for public funds. Could slightly be you know, poor and useful of governments, which was the recipients of that, but in overall terms, it's a welcome thing, I think. But yeah, will we get more money in February, March? Probably. Could I guarantee it? No, of course not. But we'd love to think so, but you know that could improve further. We'll see. Okay.
Any other questions?
Sure, just on the mitigation of the departments, saying the budget pressures and issues excluded from the above. So we are reliant on each department to it more or less the targets, or just to keep under the under their budget, well, within their budget. And what happens if they don't? How is that going to be a big impact on the overall budget?
So that is one of the suggested areas of interest that the user committee might want to take with individual service areas. Now, clearly, if services are enabled, then it will result in an in-year overspend, potentially. So that's why there is an inherent risk with this, as I said.
Yeah, so there is a risk, Councillor Linton, and obviously we'll ask each head of service for sort of details on how they plan to as we sort of invite the head of services.
Well, it's just part of the beginning of a change in approach, whereby these things, we manage them as we go along, and we just need to sort of develop that mindset change now. Yeah. Because inevitably it ends up being, you have to find a saving. If you've got a budget pressure, the council has to find a saving. And that's becoming very, very hard to do. And the biggest areas of the council's budgets having budget problems and issues are those areas where we can't make saving, but then the biggest budgets as well. Yeah. So, you know, it's an approach that we need to develop, continue to develop.
Any other questions on sort of general process? I've just got a few in terms of the kind of the new approach. So the narrative suggests that it's a proactive strategy of addressing pressures up front rather than identifying savings. How can the committee be assured that this isn't simply substituting real transformation with plugging gaps year after year?
This is the beginning of this change, and therefore at the moment we are only at the beginning of it, but transformation is going to be a key part of the opportunities that services will have to mitigate the pressures that they have. We will do transformation anyway. We're not doing transformation because of this new approach. We know that we need to do transformation. There will be a need to identify ongoing budget savings, inevitably. And therefore, actually, as those transformation starts to have an impact, they will contribute towards services being able to manage budget pressures elsewhere in their kind of areas. Okay, so. Yeah.
And in terms of the transformation, we're using some of the transformation reserve, aren't we? And that's forecasted to fall to near minimum levels there. So how will the council fund genuine transformation if the reserves are increasingly used simply to pop up demands and pressures?
Yeah, so that is subject to an ongoing conversation about the budget, which everybody is focused on that same question, that we will need to identify where we can fund this in the future, either through an increase in the base budgets for transformation. You don't need to tap into a reserve. Yeah. That you don't know if it's going to be there in 2 or 3 years' time, or we identify more funds to go into that reserve. Yeah. So we have an underspend this year, for example, which is just because that's one of the options that we could consider. So we will need to increase that reserve. But there are other opportunities around sort of the base budget as well, which I think will be more sustainable.
Okay, and in terms of sort of shifting us from a sort of a reactive mode into absorbing pressures, how can we sort of ensure that service areas are sort of incentivised to reform and redesign and eliminate waste when we're in a process of sort of just focusing on pressures rather than, have we got the right balance and focus on an internal look in each service area?
I suppose to say, to strengthen the transformation, I'd say a couple of things on that. So a couple of things we've put in place over the last 12 to 18 months with that. So the funding is part of it, and I think when you speak to the heads of service about the sort of things that they've been doing to mitigate these, what they'll be able to talk to you about is that sort of transformation journey, how they're going to manage these things. We've we've implemented a series of different things actually, service area challenge reviews, which are kind of more pointy into the nuts and bolts of performance and outputs and budget settings, etc., to ensure that that's all level of robustness and challenges in place. And also support sessions, and the support sessions are there to service and the senior teams that come in and talk around that transformation journey. This is what we're trying to achieve, this is how we need to do it, and that's both for the market understand what things they are going to do, and also go back to the funding part of it and use some requirements for funding to support some of that transformation. And you'll see the fruits of that when we talk about those sort of processes. So let's take those things are in place, and then we have a transformation program which is monitored through exec, which is making sure that we're delivering those things with some robust sort of project management and requirements. And what you've started seeing in the last couple of years is in service planning reports, you have in the service plan those major pieces of transformation within the service plan, and they can be monitored then through that service planning report. And on a day-to-day basis, we monitor all that through MIHub, which is we monitor all the performance. So it's a pretty robust system and process here, and some challenges there around making sure that we do the things that we need to do.
Good. Okay. Fantastic. Any other questions for Maureen and the finance team at this stage, or should we involve the heads of service?
We'll be staying.
Yeah, you're staying. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We will deal with infrastructure first, I believe I said. Infrastructure. Which is around fees and charges. So, Stephen John.
What page is that on, Chair?
It'll be in Appendix 2. They were 30 to 32. Don't quote me, I haven't actually clicked on it yet. They might be an appendix. Sorry, might be an Appendix 3 actually for fees and charges. Appendix 4, sorry, Appendix 4, which is a schedule of fees and charges. Social services on the first page, and then if you go down 56.
Do you want a little reduction, Chair, on this?
Yes, please, if you don't mind. Yeah, just give us a quick intro and then
I'll just come up to, because I'm going to do, you've went very fast, so I'll talk, but I think it's all directed first. Most of mine are the small scale stuff, so pretty much with the exception of housing, there are virtually no pressures and no savings. This small scale, very common pressures not funded, but not the big scale stuff we're talking about. They were still talking 100,000 euros rather than millions, so they're relatively low risk, with the exception of housing. We keep saying with the exception of housing, but so yeah, it's mainly fees and charges, probably across than the other thing we want to pick up. As we go along, probably slightly different discussion in when we get the housing back. We need to fund that extra amount. If you look at those precious funded, I think it's about 8 million. Most of that 8 million is actually partly all groups as educating. The big thing, probably quite short time is directors, will be the housing one. So.
Fantastic. Okay, I mean, Stephen, I don't know if you want to run through these really. I mean, there are a number of things that I see an increase in generally 4% across a number of them, and some sort of 0%. I don't know if you want to just run through a quick overview on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just sort of reiterate points that all in mind, if we make it up, we are looking to ensure in the balanced budget for infrastructure this year, we have got some pressures, but we have to manage within the service area. So, just in terms of fees and charges in front of you, there's no new fees and charges this year. These are sort of standard fees and charges that the council and many other councils will provide in order for, for example, street person, which is the top chunk, which enables others to work on the highway and for us to manage those processes. So the utility companies, those sorts of things. Need to go into the highway, will manage those through those. Further one down there is related to our SAM approvals.
Sorry, can you speak up? I can't hear you.
Apologies. Yeah, so that's related to our SAM approvals, so that's a sustainable drainage approval body. So that's effectively, you've got your planning approvals, you've got your drainage approvals, and it's a regulatory process, relatively new. So that's a pre-application advice service that we offer, similar to our Polisi planning. That is something we can offer, so we've been able to increase our fees there. But if you notice on sort of the bottom of that page, we mentioned a SAP application process. Now that's set, the fees there are set by Welsh Government, so there's no increases on those particular fees there, national sector there. Onto the next page then is related to our developers. So section 38 and section 278 are generally around adopting a new estate road. For example, if it's built, becomes adopted and maintainable public expense, but then there's a process to go through that as well. So those fees are related to that. 278 will be about if there's changes to the adopted highway off the new development, that is required for the new development. There's a number of sort of things there about access protection marking, so for individuals to apply for, criteria is met to try and ensure that vehicles don't park over drop curves, things like that. And then some things like switching off signals, again, and usually staff journey takers, but obviously there's a cost to us for that, so we look to recover those costs, both in office hours and out of office hours. I suppose then, often one that is public facing is a parking arrangements, or parking charges, sorry, and we're not proposing any increases to parking charges across the city there. So, Chair, that's pretty much all of my fees and charges. Like I say, haven't changed from last year in terms of the nature of them, and sort of fairly standard across most local authorities.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Any questions?
Yeah, yes. Is there charges for, especially since lockdown, we've had a lot of people doing these in their sheds or an extra room for beauty therapy things? And there was a case in the Argus last week saying that somebody was charged because they didn't have a license. Do people need a license in Newport?
No, it wasn't for Tracy, I think.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. We'll pick it up when Tracy comes up. Any other questions on infrastructure? I've just got two, if that's okay. So, the one question perhaps might be more for finance than you. So, 4% is the sort of general increase across the board. Is there a particular science to that? Because if we're suggesting that inflation is 3% at the moment, if you go to September CPI 3.8, which is generally where stuff is sort of set, if we just round it up from September, what's the science behind the 4%? Is that, are we saying that's why our costs have gone up, or where have we reached that figure in terms of our cost? Is it based on real cost, or have we just picked the figure in the middle that's got us to that? And the second question then is, you've obviously given a significant amount of extra finance this year to deliver improvements to our roads, so 6.5 million. And you said you've got some pressures in-house, and I don't think that you sort of recruited extra staff to deal with that. Did you consider whether you might need additional resource to sort of continue to deliver that? Is that something you've sort of...
Yes, if I take a second.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, there's additional capital funding.
For
the resurfacing, primarily resurfacing. That you're referring to there. So yeah, we have an in-house team to deliver projects for us. It's a very small team. We haven't recruited more permanent staff to deliver that, but we have
taken on some agency staff to support us in that particular programme to ensure we can keep the programme like we want. So some additional agency staff on a temporary basis, given the temporary nature of the investment.
So is that being funded by the capital cost effect?
That's funded by the capital cost. Yeah. So the project scheme is self-funded, so the projects it delivers, it charges fees on those projects to deliver. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
And in terms of 4%, I think deferred my finance colleagues, perhaps, but it's not exactly scientific based on every particular charge, because that would be difficult. And I'm very open to do and perhaps unrealistic. So it's taken as a sort of more gentle but almost.
The 4% is a medium-term financial plan assumption.
Yeah.
The income budgets will increase by 4% each year. If you were to tell me, is that linked to CFA? No, it's not. It's a MTFP assumption. So when you're looking at fees and charges, the question is, the budget's going up by 4%. How are you going to meet that target? That's the question. So there's no, it doesn't, services can suggest a different fee increase, but the budget will be going up by 4%.
Okay.
So therefore, you know, the meeting that target is therefore, because it doesn't necessarily have to come from a fee increase, it can come from volume increases, of course. And that's it. And the council does have a fees and charges review currently happening, which is a more comprehensive approach to this. It hasn't actually been able to incorporate that into this budget. Yeah, that is an ongoing sort of project. It's more around, do our fees and charges recover the costs or not? That's quite a lot of work. But yeah, so the 4% is the income budget where we control the income. We do have some budgets where the income is set by national bodies. They are not increased, but where they're under our control and they're above a certain minimum level, the budget will be increasing by 4%. So just be clear on that.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of that sort of 4%, then if we assume that our costs are going to go up by 4%. Isn't there a risk that all our suppliers say, well, you'll bring your costs up by 4%, so we'll put our costs at 4%? Should the increase in cost be driven by the increase in the cost to deliver them, rather than just a blanket sort of 4% fee? Would be my sort of push back.
They're probably like with that. Yeah, I think it's what you touched on. So there is a review currently underway that I think is leading on. I think, you know, we're probably going to develop a more sophisticated approach, as you say, but the current MTFP is written with that as the default cost. So, you know, it's not just Stephen, we'll see that.
Yeah. No, I said that it might be a sort of wider question because it sort of features across the piece. But yeah, there is a risk that, you know, we have a policy of 4% increase. So inflation does get back to government levels where then, you know, penalising perhaps members of the public on a 4% increase when things should be going up by inflation and our costs are not, you know, going up by the same to deliver that. So I think I'd welcome some feedback on that review as that sort of comes. I don't know if that intends to come to scrutiny.
I'm expecting to the scrutiny committee that this is a cost-cutting review, and not just basic corporate.
Okay. Yeah. I'll keep it.
Yeah,
perhaps that could be just shared with us. Fantastic. Anything else for Stephen Jarrett for infrastructure from any of the committee? Okay, thanks, Stephen. No need to hang about.
Thank you. 50 minutes.
We're on to housing and communities next. So.
So this will probably with David explaining the pressure that he has got in. I think we discussed these issues in Scrutiny many times. There's not, but the current situation where we are, and then we're working with that maybe as a, this across my correct as well.
Yeah, so I think the kind of context we need to set this in is that over the last couple of years, we've seen a sustained reduction in the number of families within temporary accommodation, but a sustained increase in the numbers of single people in temporary accommodation. And unfortunately, that rise in single people patient authority has outstripped the reduction in families with dependent children. So whilst we've seen some positive aspects, this is overtaking it. And as the committee are probably aware from lots of our discussions previously, local authorities can't retain the full cost of providing temporary accommodation due to DWP regulations around temporary accommodation. So that essentially means that whilst we have statutory duties and increased statutory duties to place homeless people into accommodation, the way the financial system works means we can't recoup the full cost. Now, the majority then of the 830 are around the cost of providing temporary accommodation. Some investment into other things, including professional services and staffing. And really what we're doing within this budget is we're saying we've got this pressure next year, but that hides some really kind of quite significant pieces of work to continue to improve areas of internal performance, such as homelessness prevention, but also continue to look at and deliver alternative models of temporary accommodation, which in time will reduce the cost of providing the accommodation itself, but also increase opportunities to prevent homelessness and to support people to move on either from temporary accommodation or from supported housing where they're able to do so, and thereby kind of freeing up some of the systems, some of the capacity we have in existing units for that client group. So, you know, that's kind of a really brief synopsis of where we are, what the figure represents, but also what we're trying to do to tackle the pressures. It's not kind of a situation where we're taking the pressure and we're not doing anything. There's a whole host of work, but we'll be kind of carrying out behind that figure. Can we touch on community centres or?
Yeah, please do, yeah.
Yeah, just community centres. So these costs largely apply to our voluntary managed, and essentially within the voluntary managed community centres, whilst there's a voluntary managed committee who are really responsible for kind of the internals and the data management, the council is responsible for the structure and exterior of the buildings. And this investment, which just gives us a bit more capacity to manage that, and to ensure that, you know, in a scenario as we have this year, where we've needed to replace a roof, there's just been a bit more capacity within the budget to enable us to meet those costs without incurring a budget pressure.
Okay, and at what point do those become sort of capital costs in the other service area in terms of assets rather than community centres? I'm guessing that's a revenue sort of issue.
It is at the moment. At the moment, those costs don't fit within the capital programme. There's a whole piece of that to look at how we utilise our assets and to kind of consider the plan around.
Okay.
The challenge with that, Jim, is obviously there's only so much money in the capital maintenance budget that is dominated by schools.
Yeah.
Hugely dominated by schools. So, and those have to be done first. So, in these sorts of small scale stuff,
I was going to ask about Malthus Court. Is that voluntary run?
Malthus Court isn't voluntary run. It's we have the social enterprise running the cafe part of the building, and the council. And
they rent the rooms out, don't they, for parties and whatever?
Some of that.
Does that pay towards the cost of the upkeep?
It supports some of the running of
But as it's an old building, the upkeep of that building must be very high.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's one of our more challenging buildings. Council.
Beautiful building.
It is.
We don't build them like they used to. It's a good job.
Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Pym?
Question. It's regarding asylum and immigration legislation, which the Home Secretary announced, I think, in November. Is that going to have an impact on our next budget? I know in parts of it says that obligations on local authorities, but we don't have to, it's not down to authorities to house asylum seekers, etc. Have we taken that into consideration in this budget?
So the way that we looked at demand for this budget is we've looked at what we've seen over the last 2 years, had a wider think about the operating environment and then forecasted based on that. We do see a flow of people from with dispersed asylum accommodation in the city coming into temporary accommodation, so we factored into that.
So if this comes into force, which I think is well in March, April, will that have an effect on our numbers? Will we carry on putting asylum seekers and refugees when legislation says local authorities, it's not mandatory now for local authorities?
So we don't place people seeking asylum in temporary accommodation because we only have a statutory duty to place people who've got recourse to public funds.
Yeah.
Where we see people from that cohort going into temporary accommodation is where they've received full recourse to public funds and are essentially like anybody else in society in terms of exercising their legal rights.
Just specifically asylum seeker cost isn't the cost of the council, that's the cost
It's
of
a
the home office cost.
So we've gone forward there.
As with the colder weather we've recently had, have we received a lot of requests from the homeless about coming into bed and breakfast?
So we've had some cold weather provision running over the cold weather to get people inside. We've currently got a very low number of people assessed as sleeping rough in the city who've been accessing that.
Because there's still quite a few sleeping in the streets, isn't there?
So
they've also got a shed or something as you're going down Marks Road on the left-hand side in the trees.
At the end of last week, so if you're aware of a specific case, Councillor Gregory, let me know after the meeting, or we can get the outlook team out there. In terms of the assessed numbers of people sleeping rough at the end of last week, they were quite significantly double tagged.
And we've got to see where we choose
Okay, any other questions for the housing community service area from anyone else? Just one if I can, so two actually. In terms of the sort of temporary accommodation, another 813 sort of thousand, and I think it was an additional 1.2 million last year. Something the year before. It's continuously sort of going up. At what point might we see that coming down and reducing numbers in temporary accommodation? And yeah, and do you think the sort of current homelessness model that we've got is financially unsustainable because we're just continuing to go on an upward trajectory in terms of temporary accommodation?
So, there's two questions linked. So, the explosion that I described, or the very significant increase I described in terms of single person accommodation, we're not seeing that abate currently. I think the ways in which we can decrease that demand, increase it, is firstly around prevention. So there is a lot of work going on at the moment to identify areas of best practice. For example, we're working with probation currently to Newportise a model that's worked really well in RCT to support trying to prevent people as far upstream as possible when they get into the criminal justice system. We've also recently received some funding which will enable us to run a project specifically on eviction from the private rented sector. So I think that's the core in terms of decreasing demand. It is very challenging with this client group because they tend to be less likely to have a kind of a housing asset before they become homeless. And in terms of the configuration of temporary accommodation, we are actively working on several projects which will become screened at some point over the next financial year to really enable us to change the model of that and to reduce the cost of temporary accommodation, but also improve outcomes for individuals. And that'll be, some projects that we'll be leading on, but also others where we're working in partnership with organisations such as Ymddiheuriadau.
So in terms of that sort of transformation and change, I guess that there's significant capital investment needed at some point, or certainly there's money to go in because you can't move everybody from temporary accommodation until you've got another solution. Do you envisage that money coming from the RSL sector or other partners, or do you think the council will need to find that capital money?
I think it'd be a mixture. I think largely they would need to be driven through the capital funding, particularly transitional accommodation capital programme.
Yeah.
And we're in early discussion with our capital projects going through that process.
Fantastic. Any other questions for housing and communities?
I think just as things the expert or not, but obviously this now for the last 2 years it feels almost like we're trying to run up and down an escalator. So it's not as if there's a huge amount of work being going on. But it's a huge challenge, it's challenges across all councils. If you look in Newport in particular, we have fastest population growth, which brings a lot of things, not so great today. And also we've got this biggest gap that we identified as the change in the lending, which means that we're hit disproportionately by this shortfall. So we've got those challenges kind of progress being made, but taking what we say we need to get more transformational. So it's a big challenge.
Yeah, and we've seen as a committee the kind of work that you've done with Service Area, because you've brought a number of different reports on different sort of areas of sort of transformation and change and updates. So we've seen all that in the context of a significant change of content in the last meeting, in terms of sort of people's experiences and how they've improved as well. So we need to acknowledge that there's been lots done. This isn't a case of just kind of the budget increasing. I'm sure it would have increased significantly more than currently the 800 if you hadn't done all that work. So you are mitigating a significant portion. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, apologies. I've had some dreadful reception, so if any noise has been created with me rejoining the meetings, I apologise in advance. Is it possible to ask Paul a question? It's not related though to the scrutiny, or could Paul give me a ring when he gets the chance, please?
We'll do it after if it's not related to the scrutiny. Yeah, I'm sure Paul can contact you.
Okay, brilliant. It's to do with George Street Bridge.
Okay. Yeah, Paul will contact you afterwards.
I'll give you a buzz after. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Next up, regeneration and economic development. Thanks for joining us, Tracy. Paul, I don't suppose you want to say anything. Pass it over to Tracy. Yeah. Do you want to sort of run through your sort of pressures and investments and all the rest of it?
Yeah, sure. I think as Paul did in his introduction before David started, the figures are relatively small in regeneration and economic development, and essentially we presented a more balanced budget this year and the things we did last year. We are covering pressures which have been identified in the report with increases in income through statutory fees, as well as some of the increases in general income. But I think, as I said, the numbers are fairly small. I don't know what we go through them individually, or do you want to just pick out?
I'm happy if you want to briefly touch on them. There's only 4 of them anyway, isn't there? So you can run through if you want.
Okay. So, oh jeez, my page. Okay, so we've got a staffing pressure in planning, which we are looking to offset by the statutory increase in fee income. The medieval ship, there's a small increase in the non-domestic rates cost. So again, looking to offset that and increase income. Building control, no pressure this year because we've got available reserves to cover any under-recovery income. But there potentially could be a pressure next year depending on what the balance of the budget is at the end of this year, what we need to draw down from reserve. And then we've got just a very small pressure then from income generation, just in terms of staff, it's 27 pressure there. But as I said, we're trying to offset that with over 300k worth of savings for next year, largely made up from increasing the statutory fees. So we don't set the statutory family fee, that was an increase from 1st December as set by Welsh Government. In some cases, it's about 50% increase in fees. So that's where we look to mitigate those pressures that I just mentioned.
I think it's probably the two sides of the same coin, really, aren't they? Well, the reason Welsh Government are increasing, they're not increasing on the work, but they're sat there, so they're increasing because on catching on the side of increased costs in the traditional offset, but you know, it just drops out broadly balance with us, doesn't it? So probably there's redundant.
Is that around sort of trying to resolve delays in the planning system, perhaps, and by increasing the fees to allow sort of additional resources?
I think it's partly that, and also just partly that they survey planning departments, so that the idea is that the cost should match, you know, the costing, and so I don't think they don't increase it every year, do they?
No, we haven't had an increase since 2020, so I think they are
doing jumps rather than.
Yeah.
So when they would have assessed whatever the costs were back then and gone, oh yeah, there's been inflation, and you do whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's been quite a big exercise undertaken in terms of what the cost of delivering the planning services across all the authorities in Wales. And certainly the Welsh Government have said that they're looking to eventually get to a full cost recovery position. But that's going to be some time off. But certainly they will be reintroducing the performance reports to understand, you know, fees have increased, what have local authorities now to invest in improving the service and service that applicants and agents are expecting. So we have looked at different options. Certainly, that's the background to that.
And in terms of the fees, sort of lots of the building control fees and stuff have stayed at the same price. Is that because they're set statutory, or because we've decided not to increase them?
So they're not statutory building control, but obviously we have to compete with the private sector in terms of building control. Yeah. So we have to be, pitch ourselves at the right cost. We did increase last year, so we tried to plug the cost this year just in order to remain competitive. That's the reason.
Okay. Any questions for Tracy in Regeneration?
First one is the ship. Have we got a forward plan for the ship? Are we going to keep it? Or I have heard rumours it might go to the Basque country in Spain.
Okay, certainly we've been progressing with the feasibility work to understand what the options are. So we will be presenting that to Cabinet for discussion, but no decision's been made in terms of future ship.
There's nothing in this budget, or is it this budget? The revenue budget for this, the height increase, just the fact that there is been stores, there's a change in rates because rates have been redone, isn't it? So it's status quo in this budget.
Did we get any additional money from Welsh Government for the upkeep of it?
No,
the cost is just this.
So the 18,000 is a rates cost.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And is it Newport City Council then picking up that, or is it a registered charity that picking up the rates and will get a reduction?
So it's the council that picks up the costs, so the lease of the building and the rates cost. There is a friends of ship.
But that's what I was wondering whether, because they would probably benefit from a rate reduction if they were responsible for the costs. So, yeah.
They just assist with operating the facility rather than the overhead.
So do the council ownership, is that
Is
yeah? Any future profit?
Unless we find the guy
She wants it.
It's long dead, I think. Yeah,
So there's no plans to sell it, like,
you want to buy it?
Nothing agreed, no options presented to date, but we've been working on the feasibility report to understand what those options could look like.
Are we ever going to vote together? Is that the plan?
About the options report.
That plan is okay.
The other question I had was about these beauty parlours that's been springing up. Do you need planning permission and a licence, or what?
There's no yes or no answer. It depends on whether it's what we call material change to the use of the property. So, if you were to, run a business from your home 24/7, and lots of people coming back and forth, lots of noise, lots of activity, then I would argue yes, you do need planning permission because you've gone from a residential house to something else that there's a.
What about if it's a rented house for a housing association?
It doesn't matter from a planning perspective whether it's rented or occupied, but the housing association may have their own rules about running a business from a residential property. So there's two different things. So the planning side is whether it's material change, but from the house association then they just be a blanket no, but they would need to check that with the relevant association.
Thank you for that. It's really useful.
And your link to the relevance to the scrutiny committee is, are there any fees that people have to pay?
So there would be a planning fee in
Shoehorn.
terms of a change of use. So planning applications we mentioned the planning fees are going up. That would be a statutory fee. But there may be a licence requirement.
Certain things, I think, that sort of, I don't spend a lot of time with beauty because you can tell. If you're injecting people or cutting bits off or putting tattoos on or all that sort of stuff, they're in the licence list. So,
It might come into environmental health as well then in terms of licensing.
If you want to know all the things that require a licence, have a chat with Matt Cridland. You maybe several hours.
No, that's interesting because we've had, well, especially in my area, we've had more and more, people converting their sheds and whatever. Yeah, surprising.
It's worth referring it to the planning department to make that assessment, but it isn't a case of yes or no. Unfortunately, it's on the intensity and I suppose the nuisance or the change that it's creating, and that's to be done on a case-by-case basis.
If you're wandering around there, it's looking more attractive now. So is that the negative?
Thanks, Chair.
Any other questions on this particular service area, regeneration and economic development? Just one from me, sorry. I sort of, in terms of the resource required for delivering the sort of city centre placemaking plan, that's probably not the right term now, is it? Just placemaking plan, I think. You haven't sort of pitched for additional resource to kind of support in the delivery of that. Is that something that's sort of been thought about and factored in? Is that picked up in the existing sort of staff resource?
You always have additional resource, don't you?
Always with the data goal. So Cabinet announced an investment last year in terms of regeneration. So we're using as part of that the additional budget to cover some additional resource for the placemaking plan. And obviously then we're looking at how we can use any grant funding that we get through to support with that sort of the administration and delivery of those individual projects.
So I'm pretty sure that's currently handled as a reserve. So rather than it being the only revenue pot, the council have got to spend their pot that way to deal with those issues. So it'll be on their reserve at some point.
Right, yeah. Because there was a new post, wasn't there, that's just gone out, which is like a new
investment.
Exactly, coming into your sort of team.
Yeah, that came under the investment the Cabinet made into economic regeneration. So there's another bit of money in there also for placemaking.
So is that a permanent post that you've then budgeted for, or have you just taken it from the reserve for a limited period of time? Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Any other questions?
Yeah, Chair, would it be okay to come up with a question? I don't seem to have the hand raising icon available to me at the moment. Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
It's regarding the regeneration and development along the river. I was informed yesterday, asking a few questions in advance to tomorrow's full council, as to what development and regeneration can take place along the River Usk. And I was told that the number of restrictions have come into place from the Welsh Government, and there are severe limitations as to what you can do to any land close to the riverfront. Now, there's been a lot of developments over the past 10-15 years along the riverfront, so I'm assuming that the law has changed or planning ruling has changed. Can you just confirm whether or not we would be able to regenerate and build any new infrastructure in the green spaces that run along the river, so Shaftesbury Park and the Glebelands in particular?
Matthew, I don't think it's a relevant question for this committee at this stage, to be honest with you. I think it's not a budget question, so if I can ask Tracy to sort of get you an update by email as a follow-up, that would be great.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah, can I just ask Tracy a question regarding, we're not putting up the planning and fees and building control fees in line with our competitors, as we call them, private building control officers. What about our site visits, where officers got to go to site? Is that built in with our fees already, or should we be charging for that? How does that work?
Yeah, so obviously the officers do site visits in connection with planning applications, so that was all part of that fee. We do need to visit the site to understand, the full context of the site. But with building control, those inspections are also built in with the type of, whether it's a floor plans inspection or a building notice inspection. So that is factored in terms of those fees.
So last year's increases, your building will cover, you predict they'll cover this year's fees, obviously, because you've got it at 0%. Well, on average, during 26, it's predicted to go by 1 to 2.5% increase.
What's the reference to 1.5%?
So that was just building control fees and the like. They were predicted to go up by 1 and 2%, 1 and 2.5% nationally. And I was just wondering, are we okay with what we got at 0%?
Yeah, so it's up to each individual local authority to set their own fees. So it all depends on that cost recovery that they're achieving. So we put ours up last year. So we're confident that in terms of the cost recovery that we're doing per application is meeting the current cost, or we can absorb, or we're comfortable with any minor gap, because say we've got to be competitive, but we're also limited on cost recovery rather than going into significant profit, which is what the private inspectors can do. So if we outprice ourselves compared to the private sector, then we won't get a lot of the income coming through. We'd only be stuck with the statutory element of the service.
Okay, Trace, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Are we all done? All done, thanks, Tracy. Do we want a quick break at this one? Probably about halfway through. Just
we still come back to Sylvia's at the end. I think she's in discipline.
She's at the end. She doesn't see him again.
yeah, we got it at the end.
If not, I'll just cover it.
Yeah, we'll have a couple of minutes break. We come back at 25 past 10, 6 minutes, please, ladies and gents.
I'll stay anyway.
Okay, welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. We just flipping the agenda around slightly, so we're going to do people, policy and transformation next, and then we'll do law and standards after that. So slight change. So people, policy and transformation, budget pressures and investments are on page 30 of the report, and then the fees and charges are further down. I think it was some fees and charges as well. Over to you, Reece. I don't know if you want to add anything, or straight over to Tracy if you want to.
Without problem, I would pretty much say very similar things to all. There are minimal improvements in the previous years. On the corporate side of it, as you know, the local authority they spend about 5% of its budget on its corporate functions, which is very efficient. If we just use those words. So there's some minor movement, but each of that can talk through any of those investments.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thanks, Chair. So I'll go to page 30 in a sec. I'd just say that earlier in the report it makes clear that there are pressures in the service that we're mitigating and managing ourselves. So they relate to digital, Welsh language, where we're working hard on some transformation arrangements, comms and occupational health. So there are a number of pressures that we are seeking to manage within the service internally, as it were. And then, as you say, on page 30 of the report, that sets out the pressures that are being imposed in this budget. So one of those is for assets, ensuring now we've done the custom country change, we've got a new company set up fully owned by the council, that we have the appropriate arrangements, robust arrangements to manage that on the council side. That's the 119. The digital and automation proposal for 47k. Actually, there's a proposal later in the budget for a saving, so that is netted off. Basically, in one area of digital, we're able to make some savings on contracts. We can get up to 47k. However, we're kind of seeking permission to spend those on supporting things like automation and AI, as opposed to support staff member use of automation and AI and help us take that forward. So that's 47. Newport Matters, overspent year on year. Actually, so that's only part of the budget, but printing costs and postage costs continue to increase. We've worked as much as we can to bring in efficiencies to keep that budget down, so that's 11k. GIS mapping licenses. In the longer term, actually, we hope to move to open source for that. We think there's some capability to potentially mitigate that in the future, but in the short term, we're very much reliant on the licenses we've got. And then the session recently that a lot of people will have seen how important that mapping work is, underpins a lot of our other changes. And occupational health, this is to do with both cost increases with a long-term provider pulled out and then to go back to the market. And we're never going to get it for that historical price, but also staff use of occupational health services and our management of sickness push that up, so it's both more costly and more of it is required. Actually, the overall pressure is 50. We're mitigating that as far as we can by savings elsewhere in HR. So I'll pause there, shall I, before I go on to fees and charges, so that constitutes the pressures for the service.
Fantastic. Any questions? You had a question, Alex, I think, on the closure of the city centre.
Yes. With the closure on a Friday, have we had any feedback how much costs we're saving in the last year? And if we're going to push forward and close maybe a Monday, we are making substantial costs.
Yeah, so funny enough, I was just updating that something else. So that isn't shown here because actually we took some money out of the budget last year. So the saving that we put in the budget last year, I think it was 94, but it was something like that, around about 90.
90,000.
90,000. Although we only closed for one day a week, we were able to make the full saving. Okay. So the energy, I think some of the energy prices changed actually during that period, but also the saving was slightly different to what we thought it might be. So we were able to fully make that saving, meaning that there isn't pressure on the second day for the time being. The feedback was, we did staff feedback, I think we took some member feedback as well, and obviously we've got limited but some customer interaction here. Also arrangements for meetings is that one day is very doable. You know, we all sort of manage with that quite well. Some people have emergency access. A second day is much harder to achieve because you're collapsing further down. So because we make the saving on a 1 day closure, I think I guess it's a pilot until it's because we're still working with it. We've got some monitoring in place for things like deterioration of the building, humidity monitoring and so on. And there'll be some challenging conversations about if you close for another day, does that make that more difficult? Longer term, we might need to rethink what we do with the building, which is probably a separate issue.
So we're going to continue with the 1 day for now, continue the pilot. Yeah.
Well, I think that would be our proposal. And if we don't do that, that money would have to be put back into the budget because I suppose what I was going to do is caveat that with you know, just a reminder then that a chunk of the building is closed on a Friday, and Newport City Council is not closed on a Friday. Yeah. So, you know, social services are still operating in these wing of the building on a Friday, CCTV is still operating in these wing of the building on a Friday, document services is still operating in the west wing of the building on a Friday. There are a series of people who've got access to the building. We've just closed bits of the building. You know, Central Library and Museum is open for staff to access, staff can work remotely, they can work from a range of locations in communities as well. So, you know, it is purely portion of the building is closed and it's released of energy savings. But as Tracy said, it's got to be managed really carefully. It's a great new start. That's the building. Yeah. We've had a lot of work done on the roof over the last 6 months in order to prevent water ingress. But you know, it is still suffers from those issues, and we've got the murals which are part of the list in which we've got to protect. So it's a bit of a balance.
Just to say while you've been talking, thank you, I checked and it was 94k.
94k, yeah.
Good memory.
Okay,
That's right.
substantial.
Any other questions?
Yes, I've got a few questions, thank you. Occupational health, is that because there's more staff on sick and it's been sent to occupational health?
I wouldn't have said so.
No.
I would have said, or if it is, it's a tiny amount. It's actually that we're managing, we've got a new wellbeing at work policy. We've been much more robust and supportive of managing staff who are sick, and actually that has paid off in terms of our sickness stats.
So it's reducing the people that's on long-term sick.
We're making better use of it. So we have more appointments and more use, but that isn't because there's more people sick. It's because we're using it more, calling it in quicker as we should, particularly things like mental health issues and so on. And the price per thing went up quite significantly. So those two things. To be fair, the pricing we had previously was quite an old model, and we were never going to get that from a local surgery. We just stopped doing the work.
The next one was the expansion of the Bridge Achievement Centre. Do you find there's more young people attending?
That's education.
No.
That's for education.
Sorry.
I could probably answer that if Councillor will leave that to the relevant scrutiny committee.
That's all then. Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, Councillor Matthew Pym.
Hello, cheers, Chair. Thank you. It was a question regarding Newport Matters. We just have confirmation, I should know, but I don't, is whether we continue in Newport Matters for the foreseeable future in written form, in paper form.
So yeah, there's no proposal to remove that at the moment. There have been discussions, I think it was in last year's saving proposals, that at some point should we go digital. But there was the challenge back from scrutiny members, I think, and others that at that time certainly they just thought we still need a paper form for those people who are not digital. We don't want anyone to be excluded. So what this is actually levelling up the budget to meet the cost of it as it is. It's no change, and it's levelling up to the cost, what it costs us.
If we don't do it already, is it possible to take snippets of Newport Matters from that monthly edition and promote it maybe across social media, just like sections of it? Maybe we could do it on the internet website for Newport City Council. So they're a part, so people are kind of familiar with the information instead of just seeing it that one time that it comes around as reminders of stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I'll double check, but I think what we do is we have information and we put it in Newport Matters, we put it on social media, and we put it on the website, because people consume in different ways. But I will check that we do that. We also promote Newport Matters on social media, so we try and encourage people.
Yeah, just that recycling of that information, because there's some really good stuff in there, and people will read it at the start of the month, and then by the end of it, they've probably forgot. I know I missed bits, and then I'm reminded that it was in Newport Matters, but it's difficult once you've thrown that, or recycled, sorry, that edition out. You've not got that information there as a backup. But again, if that information was recycled throughout the month, or maybe throughout the year, like there might be information in January's edition that's relevant all year round. So just using that across social media and reminding the public of the different resources and services that are available.
Thanks, Councillor. And if ever you do throw it away or recycle it, the whole copy is also online. So I'll have to try and find the links and send them to you. Thank you, but I agree.
Yeah, there are PDFs online. I had a question on Newport Matters as well, if I can. So given that there has been discussion about whether to keep it or not, and it was originally part of the list where he had independent groups, independent budget 2 years ago, which was knocked back and full council, and then last year it was to cut it in the original programme, and then that was decided not to. Given that costs are increasing, and I think your comment at the start was year on year, the costs increase on this. And the public consultation last year said that the public agreed that it should go to a digital format only. Why are we still continuing to prop up a budget on it when the public clearly tell us they want to see it digitally?
I start, I'm sure Bruce will want to say something, but so just checking on what the savings proposal was, which was 43, so that therefore the cost is something like 54. Yeah. So just wanted to clarify that, so we don't think we should have about 11k. I think it's a fair question. We put forward the proposal because eventually everyone will consume digitally. There was some pushback to that. That was the Cabinet's decision. So I guess the committee could take that recommendation.
Sorry, search it, which is what I was going to say. You are more than welcome to make that as a recommendation.
It just seems to me that we're portraying ourselves as a listening council, and the public have told us in the consultation they agreed with our proposal to put it to an online edition, and councillors have intervened in that, and I just wonder whether that's the right thing to do. So my own view is that that's a recommendation the committee ought to make.
I know a lot of residents don't read it, they just put it straight into the recycling.
I read it. I enjoy it. I think it's a great read.
The older generation don't read it.
I think we got to cover the people that don't have internet and phones. The older people, older generation, do like to have something physical to read. So that's my opinion.
Councillor Montford.
Yes, to jump in here. I live on the extremity of the city. I don't even get the paper copy. It's not delivered to us. So it begs the question of just how many people don't even receive it in paper form.
Can I just ask you separately? Do you want to tell me what street you live in, Councillor? Don't say it.
No, I don't mind saying it. But I have mentioned this over the years. I think I know what part of the might be, and it's because our central postman comes from Caldecott rather than Newport. I think it might be part of the issue. But when I complained about it a few years ago, somebody drove up in a car and delivered a copy to me. But it's not just me that doesn't get it in the village, it's everyone. So they certainly shut me up for a while by sending me a copy. But no, that's my concern, is that not everybody gets it anyway. Just a thought.
Yeah, and the reality is, to answer the points the other committee members made, who enjoy reading it, I didn't criticise the content. I think that, the committee said last year the content has improved significantly over the last couple of years. So it's not the content, it's the fact that you deliver it digitally or in person is the issue. I'm not saying do away with it altogether. I'm saying do away with the paper element of it. There we are. But we can discuss that as whether the committee wants to recommend that at the end. And any other questions on people policy and transformation? I just wanted to sort of pick up the point generally about the developing a robust and appropriately resourced sort of client-side function. So are we saying we didn't have a client-side function for Newport Laws? Because I'm sure that we had officers that were responsible for overseeing the Newport Laws contract. And so are we sort of just beefing up the resource that we had originally then to manage that?
Well, if I jump in here, so obviously because you were on this,
the
scrutiny review group set up and we were looking at the new arrangements, and one of the recommendations out of that was to improve the client side arrangements around it. And I think that was primarily whilst there was an officer in place to kind of oversee it, there wasn't a lot of resource placed in that.
Yeah,
most of the when it was transferred out, I think most of the resource that was to do with property services was transferred out.
Yeah.
And as you know, we had some third party advice on that as well, but that was part of their recommendation as well, was that we improved that functionality, because we, with the new arrangements, what we've got to make sure is that how that functions, whilst it's an independent company, it's wholly owned by the council, and it operates in a way that the council wants it to operate on the priorities that the council wants to, whilst achieving its the objectives as well. So yeah, that comes out of both the recommendation from Scrutiny and the recommendation from the third party, and just ensuring that actually we've got a viable product that actually does what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and in terms of the sort of wider point on that, I mean, my second sort of supplementary on that is, would the savings that we've made by not paying a profit share to Norse not be expected to cover that, therefore there wouldn't be a budget pressure? And go on.
No, go on, finish up, because I think that probably answers it all in the middle.
Well, and then I was going to say, there was an additional increase in sort of budget last year, not in this service area, but in terms of Newport Live and managing a client-side function of that contract. And we've had sort of other budget proposals for additional resource to manage client-side function. So we've got all these individual posts in service areas, but has it been considered whether you'd have a client-side team sort of citywide, if you like, that might get more benefit from having a bigger sort of pool of people?
Right, okay, so I'll take both of those in turn. So I think the short answer to the first one is, in the medium term, that is absolutely what we want to do. So what we need is a function today. The new model needs to mature. It was, again, came out with scrutiny with clear expectation from the organisation. The reason for having a local authority trading company is that it generated a profit. So we wanted to generate a profit from actually commissioning out, going out and getting work.
Yes. Yeah.
So we've got to give it some space to be able to do that, and actually then the totality of that profit, the profit for Newport City Council, the residents of Newport, to be used for Newport services. So
yeah, in
the medium term, yes, but today that's what we need.
Okay, fair enough.
And answer the second question, absolutely yes. We have had a series of conversations about that, and I think they will be, certainly desired for us to move to having a function. If you think about it, what we've had is, when we transferred out to the SRS, we've got a pretty robust digital stroke client side arrangement around that.
Yeah.
And that isn't just about contract management, that's about having people in the organisation who understand, who speak the language.
Yeah.
And I think it's moving towards that model. We've got a centralised team that can do those things, but for all of those outsourced.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for policy transformation? Okay, thanks Tracy.
That's all.
Okay, we're on to local standards now. Welcome, Mike. So, Reece, do you want to say anything or just pass straight in?
Yeah, I'll just go straight in. There's not a tremendous amount to say, Chair, to be honest with you. I mean, if we look at the budget pressures, we can get to the right. There are three essentially. The first one is the council's insurance. We were mid-year when we found out about a substantial increase in the premium for this year as part of the contract that we were already in. That was a projected uplift of £166,000. There's not in reality a tremendous amount that we can do about that. Obviously, we need that insurance. That's the council's, all of the council's insurances, so fleet, employers liability, public liability, and a few other more specialist ones that we have. The council's insurance contract that was part of does run out on the 31st of March this year. We're currently out to tender for a replacement policy. We're expecting those tender responses back at the start of next month. And then there will be an exercise to analyse those. What I've asked for is some options in terms of lower levels of cover, higher levels of cover, what impact that has on the premium. And then we will look at those in consultation with relevant senior officers and look at what the optimum solution is there, because obviously you can have super duper really high level of cover and you'll pay through the nose for it, or you can have really cheap low level of cover but you're still exposed to risk that when you get a claim in, it turns out to be a massive false economy. So the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. There in the middle, that is something we need to work through next month. So it's just to reassure the committee that that's being looked at. So that's the first one. The second one is a realignment of the law and standards budget in relation to its income target, and this is righting a historic wrong essentially. I mean, if we go back, the council used to in-house deal with its own civil parking enforcement. So particularly for parking on double yellow lines overstaying in council car parks and like that used to be all handled in-house. Since I think 2022, that's been part of the wider arrangement hosted by the Taff County Borough Council. What happened was, when it was in-house, legal services had an income, I won't say target because there's not a target in respect of enforcement, but an income expectation in terms of what that exercise would achieve. That wasn't transferred away from legal services when it was put out. So legal services always had that as an income target you could never hope to achieve without that work. So it's just correcting that. And it wasn't capable of being absorbed. It's worth saying on that the income target in relation to land charges, which sits under legal services, is also high, and that's a very difficult service to market. People either need land charges searches or they don't. But we have taken the view that as a service we can absorb that by savings elsewhere. We're trying to absorb the other thing was simply a bridge too far for what is a small service with a very limited budget. So that's the rationale for that. And the third one was the democratic services, and it's an increase in the cost of the council's WLGA subscription. Again, there's not a massive amount we can do about that. They tell us what the subscription is. We don't have to have it, but I would suggest as an organisation we do want it. And the other thing, again, is relatively minor in the grand scheme of things, but democratic services have so far upgraded 20 of the members' chairs in the council chamber because they're rather outdated.
not the design, but the fact that they have bits of metal sticking out of them and into members while they're in meetings, which obviously isn't very pleasant. And there's a few more things looking at. I think it costs something like £10,000 to have 8 chairs done, which is cheaper than replacing them, but nevertheless an expense, and not really one that we can avoid. So, you know,
Because it is part of the listing of the.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I watering, but
Well, more about watering than sitting on a bit of metal.
yeah.
you need a professional facility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah, happy to take any questions on that.
Yeah, just a question on the insurance. The 166, is that on top of additional to the insurance which we need to pay, or is that just a one-off fee for so many years because you haven't got anything in the 2027 or 2028?
It's the amount by which the premium for the 25-26 financial year exceeds the budgeted amount.
Okay, so much is it all together? You don't have to get back to me.
It'll be, that's an increase over the current cost, and that will be recurring, so that will be then the new baseline, so there's no additional on top of that for next year, but that will be the new baseline. I would say, caveat with that, subject to, obviously, as Mike said, we're out to tender at the moment, so it will depend on what comes back.
So they pay the same for their insurance, or
Don't know.
you don't?
I mean, we could look into it. I'd have to question how useful that would be, because obviously we'd have different risks. We've got different services to other local. We need to find 2 local authorities that have got exactly the same range of services and exactly the same size, exactly the same number of staff, same number of schools. I think you could probably get something from it, but I think if we did do that, there'd be a massive caveat on data.
In terms of insurance, then, so as far as a bit confused, so this 166,000 is in next year's budget, but the pressure is this year. Because you say that we're overspending the current year, but then we're saying 166 next year, but we're tendering, and the insurance market is dropping, prices are dropping, not going up.
So that is a really good question. So because of the timescales of this, and I'm getting the budget said, what we've had to do is put a marker in to say, well, currently it's 166,000 pounds of the budget, so that will be the investment. Because at the moment, we can't wait until March 31st to set the budget when we're more.
I get that. Yeah.
So we might end up with a surplus in that budget, or we might end up with a slight shortfall. We're just going to have to deal with that as an in-year next year. And if it's over what we're currently on the budget, obviously we can take that back over the budget for next year then.
Yeah. And so in terms of,
but it's a time.
So the 166,000 sort of overspending this year, is that an annual policy that we have?
They are. It's a multi-year arrangement, but
because they tend to give you a 3-year option mostly for the larger insurers.
They do, but they set the premium every year. So what's happened here is we've done the budget, and then they come back to us and say, "This is your premium for this year," and we've said, "Well, okay." So you're tied into the contract to set the premium every year.
And do we use insurance sort of brokers or advisors then? Yeah. I mean, there's a bit of criticism on them really then, isn't it? To not have anticipated this prior to and gone out to the market in advance rather than sticking to the current insurance.
Well, we were, I mean, I think that's a fair comment to an extent. We were tied into that contract, so we had to go with that insurer. Could it have been anticipated better? Yes, it possibly could have been, and this discussion would have been taking place at last year's budget setting in that case. What I would say is we have tasked that broker with going out to market to get us the most cost-effective solution for next year. So.
And have we maintained the same broker throughout sort of the last 15, 20 years, or have we looked at actually who we use for insurance advice and brokerage?
I did have I mean, I don't know about the last 15 or 20 years. I did
just picking things are we in a static arrangement that's been going on forever and a day, or do we review it regularly?
We do review
probably a better question, sorry.
Yeah,
We could reappoint the broker. We did have a conversation about it. We took the view this time that it made sense to stick with the current broker and task them with analysing the market and presenting us with some solutions. It's certainly not something I've ruled out for the future. And I've been in conversation with the insurance manager. I have said that that's something that we can change as well, and that's something that we can keep under review. So whilst we've decided not to change the broker this time, it's not something I've ruled out going forward.
Yeah, it's certainly good governance to at least review it and sort of and think about it. It saves you auditors. I know that we're different to the private sector, but it's good governance to look at. Who provides you audit services, who provides you insurance services, who provides you services on a regular basis, and brokers as well as sort of insurance providers. So sort of I would recommend that we review on a reasonably regular basis. You don't review it, and you certainly expect to look at it every sort of 3 years, I would say.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions for law and standards? Any questions online for law and standards?
No.
No, fine with me, Chair.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm trying to get better insurance.
Yeah. Demonstrated the need for insurance. Thanks very much. Thanks, Mike. Mike, are you available this afternoon? If I give you a ring?
Yes, I'll be online.
Fab. Okay, final service here. I think, are we environment and public protection? Are we?
Service.
They're only.
I was going to say this again. There's not much in this area. There's no new pressures, and there's a small saving on some additional commercial income. So it's mainly sort of fees and charges really in this area. Good question.
Should we open straight up to questions on the sort of 2 points on page 37 and then the fees and charges further down?
33.
Sorry, that's 7? It's right in over, I think it's 37. Right, top of 37, appendix 3. And then, yeah, sorry, there's also the ones on 32 and 33 as well.
That's the question regarding
the
new waste recycling centre.
Yeah.
So, all on the list, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, is there any news on it? I know is the earmark for 2028. Is that realistic in open or?
So obviously we need to agree some land purchase to do some design stuff. There is work ongoing on that, but until we've secured land, we want to go into details on that. Effectively, what this budget is doing is it's effectively removing the pressure in quite a complicated way because the way funding comes in now, we'll be able to use producers to pay for the additional costs. So it was previously thought it would be an extra burden.
Yeah.
One line would wipe out the other. So when that comes into place, so if you noticed, so in the last few months, we've been doing some temporary pop-up sites. So as long as we meet a minimum standard of that, so we're doing it, that'll be able to then fund it in future years. So they'll carry on and extend that now for the next this year.
Is this new centre going to be located on the east side?
It's in the east side, and that's the commitment to David Blossom's to. Obviously, we've got, as we had one for a long time, so it's quite. But by other standards, it's very restricted.
The loss of income on the landfill site closure. So is that projected to close next year?
So that's that's been running down this year. So remember, these are previous.
They are knock-ons. I know the trees are knock-ons.
So this is like a full year impact. So it's been run down this year, so it fades out, and then next year's budget is to take the rest of the hit, if you like, to the same of the trees. So it's a phased in thing. So if you remember, we would have agreed it last year, I choose the year before, but it's phased in. So this shows the full year impact of it.
Yeah, and the tree maintenance was the same as 15 last year.
Yeah, that's right.
and the reintroduction of the leisure centre budget.
I think that should be regen, shouldn't it?
Oh, it is regen, yeah, apologies, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think that's the previous year's worth.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions for environment and public protection?
Yes, Chair, if it's okay, just with tree maintenance, that there doesn't appear to be any projections of an increase in costings for tree maintenance across the city. Does that include kind of emergency jobs? Are we putting any money aside with the change in the weather that we're experiencing more and more with stormy weather? If we're working at that operating budget, should we not be putting some money aside into possibly an emergency fund, but just maybe deal with some trees across the city that are in a precarious position that may need treating in advance of kind of the stormy season of October, November and December?
So yeah, that's what that core revenue budget does deal with. It's some planned but largely responsive. But as you highlight, it's impossible. It's a bit like winter maintenance in highways. We can't put it's a variable budget, so there isn't a buffer, if you like. It's just 1 year will be over, the next year may be under. What this does is it sort of addresses the fact that for trees for the last 5 years we've been over and over and it's been growing. The sort of more planned stuff, you've talked about ash dieback has been the big one in Newport, it's been a massive, those tend to be funded through a reserve setup, so ash dieback is the one that I know in my time here, but obviously Dutch elm disease before I was born, but there's other things that affect trees and they tend to be, if they're going to come and then go, they'll be reserved is more appropriate for that. This is the ongoing maintenance, but as you say, when the weather is bad, trees go down and if the weather is bad before the leaves come off, then it tends to be worse and vice versa. So there's always a bit of a risk in those budgets, but I don't think there's any other way to deal with having the responsive. So they should be addressed for most of those concerns. In terms of how they're dealt with, there's a tree strategy that I think was updated quite recently. I'm not familiar with all aspects of the tree strategy, although I did read it at the time, but we can send you a copy if you like, Councillor.
Thank you. No, it's just like I said, we're experiencing more windy weather. We got a lot of big trees in Newport, and as long as the surveys are updated and when we're kind of planning ahead the best we can, and yeah, that's great.
Any other questions on environment and public protection? Fantastic. Okay. I'll invite Maureen back up if that's okay, Maureen. We'll sort of wrap up some overall recommendations and see if there's anything else for finance, more generally flexible. You touched on wage growth assumptions at the start, at the very start of it. And we've obviously got in 3% this forthcoming year and then 2.5% annually thereafter. So doing some of the market research suggests a level, and I know that you've spoken to some other local authorities on that. I did a little bit of research. WTW salary budget planning survey undertaken in January suggests 3.6% next year. IDR suggests 3 to 3.49. Bright Mind and Personnel Today suggest 3.2. And obviously national living wage is 4.1%. Which I know will impact some of the care contracts which are sort of outsourced, but as we sort of transform and try and bring some of that in-house, we'll feel the benefit of that because we might be delivering more children's homes in council-run facilities perhaps than, although that might probably won't be next year, although there is some plans to develop the one. So I just wondered sort of what your thoughts were on the, 3% might be okay for next year, but is the 2.5 right for the following years or not?
So
are they prudent?
So the MTFP, we will keep it updated. So next summer, we'll take a look at that 2.5% again.
Yeah.
And we'll see what the context is looking like then as well. We'll probably know what the 26/7 pay rise is by late summer. You know, maybe before, but who knows? And we'll keep it under continuous review. We have, in my memory, we've only been a bit short on the pay in MTFP once, actually, bizarrely, this year as well. Yeah, 0.2, it was 3.2, and we allowed 3. Teachers' pay has been higher than we have allowed for. Yeah. Welsh governments have actually funded that, and that's because Welsh government actually decides on teachers' pay in Wales. So if that was to happen again next year, then we would hope, if they're able to, that they will fund that again. Because they've been very clear that they allow 3% in the RSG for pay. So if teachers' pay is higher, then we can, as a collective voice, the local sector should be able to ask for that to be fully funded. No guarantees that they'll be able to do it, of course, at this point. But yeah, it's an inherent risk. You can't escape it. The pay rise is pretty much agreed after the year begins. Yeah. And therefore you have to go with the best assumptions that you've got at that time. I guess I was pleased that we were in the pack. It means that we weren't an outlier, because if you are an outlier, you're thinking, well, what's that I missed, as it were, we weren't.
And how unionised are we as a workforce in terms of percentage? I mean, teachers tend to be more unionised than sort of general public sector staff normally. Might be able to help on this. And, you know, because there's quite a bit of strike action out there, you know, that we risk will end up in a dispute with staff.
Teachers is quite unionised, yes, and then there's 2 unions that represents the rest of the workforce in the main. So what you want to do?
You can't volunteer and then say, do you want to go?
Oh, no, honestly, Tracy's down in HR, but I caught your eye first off. So, GMB, Unison and Unite, although we have very few Unite members in the course. What I suppose the point I was going to make is, whilst there might be some local ballots and some local action, we've seen that in some local authorities. Yeah. The pay was agreed nationally. Yeah. So there'll be a Welsh representative on the local government association. But yeah, there'll be a union request for it, and there'll be an employer's response to that, and then there'll be some to and fro and some potentially some ballots, and then there'll be a decision made. And I think mine is quite optimistic that being the summit. We've had that as late as February. Yeah. In the last 5 years, so you know there's often some to throw in. Yeah. But obviously we've got a partnership forum with all our trade unions, schools and non-schools. We meet with them regularly to talk to them about issues that we work under the big banner of social partnership as well. So you know we have good relationships with all of them.
Okay, we'll keep it. Could I just ask you to explain the employers' national insurance sort of rebalancing that's in the budget? So there was 4.5 million last year that we were expecting to be funded by central government, which appears in this year as a rebalance.
Yeah, fairly straightforward that one. So this time last year, we were informed pretty strongly by Welsh governments that they would fund as much of that as they could. They didn't know what they were going to be receiving from the Treasury at this point. But whatever they would receive, they would be allocated. So we included a specific grant of 4.6 million in anticipation of receiving that at some point in the year. So we did. And we got enough. That was that was good. That's now been subsumed into the RSG. So therefore we write out that specific grants because it's now part of the overall RSG. So it's basically a very straightforward specific grant that has now been subsumed into the RSG.
Got you.
Which is why 20 million extra RSG, extra money was 60.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's really useful. Any other questions from Maureen, or can we wrap up recommendations? Can you offer certain recommendations?
Thanks very much, Chair. These are just comments I've taken from the committee for things you can go forward. In relation to finance, we've got that comment there that you the future consultation should give residents opportunity to comment on how late funding could be used. In relation to import matters, the net budget shortfall, may comment if the council would consider maintaining, go on to online publication only.
Is that a recommendation which the committee wants to make? I mean, that's a recommendation I would make, but I don't speak for the whole committee. So, yeah. Would any other committee members support the committee making a recommendation to Cabinet to convert Newport Matters to digital?
Perhaps maybe consultation. I would look rather than go straight online.
Consultation.
Like the public, like we should go online.
It was done last year and they said yes.
Was it? Yes,
what was it? Mark, Chair, what was the numbers in terms of the consultation? How many people offered that feedback?
Like 70%.
It's a consultation online because most of the people who appreciate it are online. I don't mind that they're going to use it, and she loves to do what that is.
Yeah. It was a mixed bag last year, wasn't it? Consultation on the budget, so it wasn't just online.
The consultation, so there's an online version of it. They are available in a variety of places. We do them through obviously boards of meetings and things like that. We can do it now. We can have a look at the breakdown.
Yeah, can you if you want to? I don't know what the response level was. Councillor Screen, did you have your hand up? You wanted to come in on that point?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, on the Newport Matters, I'm a bit wary about stopping it completely because of digital exclusion. You know, the number of people who don't actually have access to the internet or use the internet. I think there needs to be a bit more, a bit of research into that. Try and find out what percentage of the population in Newport, wouldn't access it online. I can see the rationale for it, but I'm just a bit wary of digital exclusion.
I'm in conclusion, following Councillor Screen, I agree with digital exclusion. And I say a lot of people do like having something physical and read, otherwise we'd be getting everything will be going online and we're alienating a certain element of people.
It's sign of the times, I'm afraid, Councillor Linden, isn't it? You know, it's it's
sad times.
Tip appointment online, so you can't have the bun and eat it, can you? Cake and eat. So that would be my point. Do we want to put that to a vote as to whether we want to make that a recommendation?
Yeah. All in favour, raise your hand.
All in favour of recommending Newport Matters is only a digital version? Sorry.
If I just come in on the consultation, I can't find the end figure, but it was around the 80% agreement. I'll update after the meeting, but it was quite high numbers.
Yeah.
But was that just solely on, was the consultation for online?
Well, it was still at board meetings, online and so on, but the consultation, I guess people are considering it against those other savings, aren't they? It's a set of savings and you agree with some and not with others. It wasn't just about Newport matters.
It was last year.
Does that make sense? Just last year's
At that
budget.
time.
Yeah, but last year's
Again,
budget consultation.
yes, so we can't really take that.
I can find the end figure, but it was quite high.
So
I'll bring it
personally
up at my
support-
next ward meeting.
So this time last year, utilising alternative methods to communicate with Newport residents rather than printed copies of Newport matters, 76.3% make the full budget saving. For 15% make a smaller budget saving, and then only the balance of 8% said no. So fully and partially it was not partially empty, but yeah, 76 said full.
We're not allowed to get rid of the Welsh.
So perhaps we can sort of compromise in the middle and make a recommendation that Cabinet undertake a review of the future direction of Newport matters.
Yeah, let them review it. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, is everybody happy with that?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll word it that way.
And took the comment and the Vice Chair about for the insurance premiums, recommended that the Council undertake regular reviews of the insurance brokerage arrangements and ensure value for money and stronger planning of premium changes.
Yes, and good governance. It's good governance.
So that's something that the committee in a whole would like to make.
Everybody happy with that? Yeah.
Yes.
Those, Chair, was there any other recommendations the committee would like to make in relation to any of the budget pressures in service areas?
No, I think that covered everything. I think, in terms of our response to overview would be that, we receive satisfactory assurance from each head of service that they had plans in place to meet the budget pressures that they needed to meet to produce a balanced budget. I think that was, we asked enough questions and we got sufficient answers, didn't we? So aside from the recommendations we made, I think that's what. Is everybody happy with that?
Yep.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Item 4 on the agenda then. Scrutiny of reports. Okay. Yeah. Thanks everyone for your time. Much appreciated. What do you need on the scrutiny advisors reports?
So, just to advise from page 75 onwards, we've got the outstanding actions and incomes monitoring. We just received a couple from People, Policy and Transformation during the meeting, which I'll send out to the committee. There's quite a few outstanding, but I'll be chasing those up as well. The next committee meeting will be on Monday, the 16th of February. That will be for the recruitment and retention update. And shortly, Sam and myself will be meeting up with directors and heads of service to discuss topics for the draft work programme for 26-27. We'll then send out committee members to review, and then we'll discuss it further and we can confirm as well as take on any suggestions from the committee members.
It's at the same time.
That would be 2 o'clock. So.
What, we need to be here for 2 or?
1:30 for 3, please.
Most of us are here now. I mean, would members prefer to meet at this time that we did today, 11:30, or would they rather keep it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
I would prefer it at this time.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, Chair.
I'm easy.
At the minute, I prefer the 2:30, but I'll go along with others.
There's a general consensus. We can change next meeting and future meetings to like the 12 o'clock start and half past 11 pre-meet. If that's something the committee would like to do.
I mean, I'm easy either way, so I'd rather, ensure that people can attend, and what's the best way to do that? So just let us know what you guys want, really, so it makes no difference.
I know we shouldn't be governed by the officers and the directors, but they're normally twitching in their seats about 4:30, and they're in a rush to get away. Because a lot of them travel and they've got other plans. So I think it's going to be more productive. I think if you do a bit earlier in the day, I think we're going to get more of the time and attention of the panel.
I'm inclined to agree with that. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, to be honest. So
yeah.
Do we want to try the next meeting there at 11:30, pre-meeting 12 start, or 12 and 12:30 start? It makes no odds.
Should I check with is Tracy and Kevin Howells in for this at the end, right?
Yeah.
Should I check if they with the last meeting?
Yeah.
If so, then we can change it. I can check the committee update. But for the future meetings for the upcoming year, we can certainly change it from 12 o'clock meetings.
Yeah. Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. We can always review it again if you guys are not happy. So it's your meetings, and it's better to make sure people can attend. So yeah, perfect. Thanks all.
Thank you all. Bye. Bye.
Yeah, we didn't need 2 minutes. The last meeting we said bye.
It's 2 hours really. It's long enough because it's absolute freezing.
So it's still.
Yeah, we're still core. Let's just agree the minutes of the previous meeting. That's okay. My fault. I missed it. I don't have any issues with the minutes of the previous meeting. Matthew, happy with the minutes of the previous meeting?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Yeah, generally a good job then. Perfect. Right, meeting closed. Thanks everyone. Sorry, my fault.